Hi, this is Alexis from Pear Tree Education. I'm one of the writers on the website Inquiry into Education. The book I'm reviewing today is Rose Blanche by Roberto Innocenti. It was published by Creative Editions in 1985. The book is a historical fiction picture book set in World War II Nazi Germany. It's a great supporting resource for an introduction to war, particularly the Second World War, topics around the Holocaust, and also discussions around peace. The story is told from the perspective of a brave young girl named Rose Blanche who one day notices a boy being captured by some soldiers and taken away in an army truck. She follows the truck to the outskirts of the city, where she discovers a concentration camp. Rose Blanche realizes the children behind the barbed wire fence were suffering far more than her, and she made daily trips to the concentration camp to smuggle bread to them. The story ends with the war ending and a foreign army taking over her village, presumably the Americans or the Russians, and she returns back to the concentration camp where fighting is happening. The ending is left for the reader to infer the fate of Rose Blanche. Educationally, the book portrays how much people suffer during war at a level that's appropriate for children, and also how brave people will be to stand up for something that they believe in, even if it's not considered right. The book depicts how a child can experience the tragedies of war without really understanding it, which is why I think it's such a great resource. Your students will have a greater appreciation for the suffering that happened even if they don't understand all the politics behind war. The illustrations are incredibly realistic and very typical of Roberto Innocenti, and this adds another layer to the book. The realism of the pictures helps the reader to really identify with Rose Blanche, and allows the reader to experience the war through her eyes. The book is what I define as a true picture book, because the illustrations need to be read simultaneously with the words to truly understand the story. It's also a great picture book to use to develop inferring skills. In some ways, the book is comparable to The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, a juvenile novel by Boyne. However, because this is a picture book, it makes it more accessible to lower-level readers and younger children, and it can be read in a 20 to 30-minute block. I give the book a 4 out of 5 rating. The message behind the book is very powerful and leaves a lasting impression on the reader. The book's a great resource to use for topics around war, specifically the Second World War and the Holocaust. And it'd be a great book to use for discussions around peace and extending help to others that are suffering from hardship. It's a book you could use for intermediate grades or even in high school to consider a different perspective for war. And if students have minimal background to the Second World War or the Holocaust, it's likely that they're going to ask their own critical questions. For example, my students asked, why didn't anyone stand up for the Jewish people? And why were the Jewish people's opinions not valued? Because the book is so powerful, though, it can be perhaps a bit too overwhelming for a younger audience. I read this book to a grade 2 class, and several of my students cried at the end of the story. But it did result in incredible discussion, and I felt that my students really tried to grapple with the concept of war after reading this book. A different, perhaps tamer book wouldn't have necessarily achieved this. And I read this book around Remembrance Day, and even though it wasn't about the First World War, I do believe that it helped my students remember those who suffered during war. If you think you'd be interested in using the book Rose Blanche in your class and are interested in doing some activities in conjunction with this book, I'll be doing a teacher guide video next week as a follow-up to this. This is Alexis from www.inquiryintoeducation.com. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.